The epistle for today's Mass, traditionally, comes from St. Paul to the Romans, where he says, "Oh, the depths of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments and how inscrutable his ways! For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor?" What St. Paul is saying is that it's impossible for us to really understand God. He's saying a lot of other things, of course, as well. But the point that I want to make by reading this passage is the fact that God is beyond our comprehension. And that's particularly in the case of the mystery of the Most Holy Trinity. Now, as Dr. Cathall said in seminary, if you get up on Trinity Sunday and say that the Trinity is a mystery beyond our understanding and there's nothing more to say, and then sit down, I will hunt you down like the dogs you are. There's obviously things that we can say, but we have to really start by accepting the fact that while the human intellect can arrive at the knowledge of God, a supreme being, even a creator, and therefore even atheism is not founded for those who are intellectual. The fact is that it is not possible to understand that God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit without the revelation of Jesus Christ. We can arrive at the idea of a God, but we cannot understand what that means in the Holy Trinity. God has revealed himself as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So all of what we have in our catechism, hopefully what you learned from when you were children, is not something made up by the Catholic Church. This is revealed by God. What the Church did was take what Jesus taught us, and using our understanding, and especially the understanding of the vocabulary of Greek philosophy, we took what Jesus told us and we came to a greater understanding of it by studying it and praying about it over the centuries. So it's important that we really understand this mystery, that it is a mystery, and the things that we are capable of understanding, but we're never going to understand it completely because of how deep a mystery it is. The only part of that mystery which I want to speak about today is really the practical side. Certainly we should know what we profess, what we say in the Creed, and what we understand in our catechism. But from a spiritual and from a practical application standpoint, the thing about the Holy Trinity, which is the most practical, is understanding the relationship between the persons. And obviously we have simplified versions of that, and it's more complicated theologically. But what we really want to remember is that the Son, combining words there, the Son is loved by the Father. The Son loves the Father. And in that love, we have the Holy Spirit, because they're God, and therefore their love is a person. So when we say that God is love, we don't just mean, I feel God in my heart, or I feel the love of God. And I hope you do at times in your life feel the love of God. But that's not what we mean when we say that God is love. What we mean is that in his essence, who he is a relationship of love. And then, of course, that he shares that love with us. And so when we say that we're made in the image and likeness of God, we certainly mean, on a basic level, that because we have a soul, and we share in a soul having the capacity of the intellect and the will to know and to love and to choose, we are certainly like God in that. But even beyond that, God created us male and female, and within families, so that we understand that love is interpersonal, that there is an interaction, that there is a bond, and that it connects people. And so we're created that way, and we live that way because it is of God. And, of course, because of sin, which is fundamentally a failure to love, we humans have been rejecting that plan and that design and that pattern that God has given us since Adam, at the instigation of the devil. And in our day, this war seems to have reached some kind of a climax in the utter confusion and rebellion against love that we're living through. So let's bring this home to a very concrete example based in current events. So recently, a number of children were shot in a school in Central Texas, in Uvalde. Now, this tragedy is being used by our overlords to try to convince us to give up our right to bear arms and defend ourselves, and it's being politicized, and everyone's having all these debates, we're seeing them on television, all other stuff. That's not what I'm talking about today. It's a whole other subject. Regardless of the very real heartbreak in these families, and regardless of the politicization of this event, the cold-hearted politics that are happening, what I want to share in light of today's feast is something that the professional opinion of an exorcist about the perpetrator of this crime. And in his post on his blog, Catholic Exorcism, I think I've shared links before, he goes through a couple of symptoms of the kind of people that do this kind of evil. And if you listen very carefully, you will see exactly how opposed to love all of this is. The first, and opposed to relationship. The first is isolation. Also distressed family environment, low self-esteem, feelings of victimization, inner rage or anger coupled with feelings of powerlessness, inner distress expressed by externalized violence, narcissism, etc., etc., etc. And while again, the consequences of this and what this young man did are very evil and they're very tragic, I hope you hear in that list the very diabolic pattern of a failure to be loved and to love and to live in relationship of love that God created us for. That's why it's diabolic. And this is exactly what the devil tries to produce in us, because it is contrary to God's plan for us. We certainly have free will, but the longer I live, the more I'm convinced that the root of sin and unhappiness is a lack of love received, or at least a perceived lack of love. Again, there is free will, and everyone should be held accountable, especially for things like this. But if you have a heart and a soul, you should be able to sense in all of this that there's something fundamentally wrong in the person. Not simply that they choose to do something like this, but their entire life pattern is behind this, and that there is something very flawed with the whole thing. And that causes me then to share very emphatically this message today. Everyone needs to receive affection, affirmation, and approval. Everyone needs to receive affection, affirmation, and approval. Everyone needs to receive them regardless of their age or their state in life. Everyone needs to know that they're valued. Everyone needs to know that they're loved in a healthy and even physical way. And everyone needs to know that the good things about them are good. How many of our children never get hugged? How many of our children are never told that they're loved on a daily basis? How many children are never accepted except when their interests correspond with the interest of the parent? And I don't want to hear, I never received that kind of love and I survived. You may have survived physically, but you didn't survive. It always takes a toll on us. And what happens then is when we don't receive it, we don't know how to hand that on to others, and we perpetuate the cycle. So, while there is certainly free will again and other influences, I am convinced that the reason many of our young people make the bad choices they make is because they are lacking for the love that they are not getting. And this is all based on the fact, I say this later on, but I want to make sure I'm very clear right now. This is based on the fact that people principally receive their understanding of what love is, what the love of God is, from their parents and from their family. And so when that is not what it should be, despite their rebellion and free will, there is definitely a contributing factor of their making these poor decisions. So, many youth, for example, never connect with their mother because she's always being the disciplinarian because her husband does not want to be. And he doesn't want to be because he is afraid of losing the affection of his children if he disciplines them. Because he never got that affection. And he may not even realize that's what he's missing or why he's doing it. But that is a lack there. Many young ladies seek for the love of men before they're ready for a serious relationship because they do not have the true love and affection of their fathers, or they don't perceive that they have it. Many young men end up looking for love or seeking love from other men because they lack the love and affirmation of their fathers. Now notice I say young men, you're young ladies, it's a whole different dynamic. The whole thing is really complicated. Very often, women are running from abuse, actually. They're not running to a lack, they're running from a lack. And so they're seeking, again, I'm not going to belabor the point, but it's a bit complicated. The point is, though, that at a time when June is celebrated not as the month of the Sacred Heart, but Pride Month, too many Christians respond inappropriately. They respond back with slogans. They respond back with only talking about the sin. They only respond back with their own bumper sticker one-liners, which don't do any good. And the reason this is so important is not only because bumper stickers don't usually work anyway to convince people of anything, but because when you're dealing with a group of people who have a disordered outlook on what romance, love, marriage is, because of their lack of love, experience of a lack of love, your being uncharitable and harsh about it is only going to make them run from you because you are doing exactly what they are trying to get away from, or the opposite of what they're looking for. Now, we live at a time when it's impossible because the media and the government and everybody is behind this brainwashing to convince people it's all right. But for the few people that might have a chance of converting, of rejecting a lifestyle which will only make them more miserable because they're looking for love in a place that will not satisfy them, we have to respond as charitably and patiently and kindly as possible. Never accepting the sin, but never attacking either, because if you attack, you're simply going to drive them further away. And if you're the only Christian that's talking with them, they are going to also reject Christ because of that. Many men and women seek for love illicitly outside of marriage because their spouse uses them to satisfy their own needs instead of loving them for who they are. Your spouse does not exist to make you happy. Your spouse does not exist to fulfill you. Only Jesus can fulfill you. And if you put that burden on your spouse, you will make your spouse and yourself eternally miserable because they are incapable of doing so. Many adults make the lives of their family miserable because they insist on being given the affection and affirmation that they're starving for from people that they can guilt into it. Now, you young people particularly better be calling and visiting your parents. Okay? That is your obligation. However, if you are lonely, do not make the lives of your family members miserable by trying to guilt them because of that obligation into visiting you more, etc., if they're already visiting you like they should. Obviously, that's very subjective, and I'm not going to make a blanket statement, but I am saying be careful because I've seen that time and again, where in light of a true obligation that is to honor our father and mother and to visit, etc., and to support them, that is used then to beat them over the head and makes everybody miserable as well. So be careful of that, please. And finally, on the other side, because I'm assuming that I'm speaking to people who all have done their best to love their families, to love their spouses, to love their children, etc. I'd like to think that's a safe assumption. I also know, based on my own experience in my family, in watching other people's families, and as a father, that just because our children do not perceive the love doesn't mean that the love is not there. It does mean, however, that we need to be cognizant of the fact that even with the best of intentions, that love is always communicated. I'll give you a very simple example. I mentioned them earlier. Because there are different love languages, there are different ways to perceive that love. Very commonly, men work their butts off to support their family. They work long hours, they're exhausted, they do as much as they can to provide for their family. And yet, they never hug their children, and they never say they love them. And in their minds, they have sacrificed so much because they have. But it's important that it gets communicated. I have the same thing as a priest. Anyone who knows me knows that I exhaust myself for this parish. But if you just listen to me from one sermon, I can just sound like a jerk or an uncaring. And so I have to remember and try and work on, although it's going to take a long time, so be patient, to remember that part of that perception is how that's communicated. Again, we have to be cognizant of that. But in the end, remember free will. If you've done your best, your children still have free will, and your children may still fail. And that is not necessarily your fault. Again, I have to deal with this all the time as a priest. I do give the best that I can, and people constantly leave. Now, some of it's because I need to tweak the way I speak, etc., etc. But sometimes it's just because they don't want to hear it. They don't want what I'm offering, and I have to accept that. So I know it's a very delicate balance, and I know this is a very emotional topic, especially for those of you who are older and have grown children, and you maybe feel guilty, or your children have made bad choices, and then you feel guilty because you think you may have contributed, you may not have. That's something that should be taken up, of course, in confession or in some kind of either pastoral or clinical counseling, and that can be talked about. But I think it's very important to be aware of the need. And again, some of you, it's too late. You just have to do a lot of praying. For some of you, you still have children at home, etc., and that's something you need to be aware of, and you can do better about it. But either way, remember that the triune God, who is a relationship of love, has taken up his dwelling in our hearts at baptism. And as long as we don't kick him out by mortal sin, he remains with us. He's love, and he has created us to share in that love, and to share that love with other people. So please do not let another day go by without being reconciled to the love of God if you are in a state of sin. Please do not let another day pass without at least trying to forgive people who have hurt you, whether they knew it or not. Do not let another day pass without loving your family, your friends, your co-workers, your fellow parishioners like you were created to do. For the greater glory of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, your salvation and the salvation of your neighbor.